Oh, what a lively group. You hear a pin drop in here.
They just threw food. They cried.
As soon as he starts talking, we're going to clear out.
That's right now.
Put you on fast forward.
This is what, first meeting, Mark's been here since the first of the year?
Yeah, welcome back, Mark.
Welcome back, Mark. Dee's doing good, you're not on the cane or crutches?
No, not on, I've been off them for 4 weeks now. Yeah.
When I had my knee done, I'm gonna milk it like a herd of cows.
You can do that.
Use your cane.
Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering us here today. As always, we ask that you be behind us as we are just doing our best to make good decisions for our city and our citizens. We ask that you are behind those who keep us safe, our police officers, firefighters, and military personnel, and all other service members in our country. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll call February 18th, 2020, City Council order. Roll call.
Everyone, we excuse Councilman Dan Dunn and Langford. Mr. Langford has health challenges and Mr. Dunn is
Second.
Motion.
We got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And before we start the council meeting, just remind everybody to please speak into your mics. And for anyone in the audience that wants to do citizen comments, please flag the yellow card. Okay, so we got the agenda approved. We got citizen comments. I have one from Eric Sawyer, a non-resident of the city.
Mayor and council members, thank you. My name is Eric Sawyer. I am president of the Spokane Sports Commission. And I'm here this evening to hopefully start something in motion with some support from the city of Liberty Lake. Senator Jeff Foley has introduced a bill, Senate Bill 6592, which is sort of long overdue to upgrade the current TPA, Tourism Promotion Area Assessment, which the city collects, and also the county and across the state. These funds are a $2 assessment on a hotel stay, which is then reinvested back into tourism marketing. The city of Liberty Lake collects these funds. Most of them is reinvested in Visit Spokane. Meg Winchester, who is my counterpart from Visit Spokane, wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't make it, so I'm here on a solo venture. But we are, as a local hospitality industry and the state hospitality industry are supporting this bill to make a couple of changes that are important to the tourism industry in our region. Right now, there is a $2 cap, which has been there for 16 years. We're asking that this bill in the legislature take that $2 cap to a $5 cap. Doesn't mean we go right to $5 in the assessment. it gives us the opportunity to work our way up that as it's built on the tourism strategies of our region, including the city of Liberty Lake. So what I'm asking for, and there's a number of other elements to this bill that makes some, kind of bring it into the 21st century. We want to be able to provide an opportunity for cities under a population of 40,000 across the state that can also form TPAs. This provides a sunset clause out in 2027 so that we can take a look at it and measure how well this assessment is doing in tourism marketing. I do have a one-sheet background that I'll pass around. So what I'm asking, and I thought this was a good start to get this conversation going, is I know you have a process when we come to legislature, but we would ask that the city support this bill, and Senator Holy, it is right now come out of rules committee in the Senate, and we expect any day now to go to the Senate floor, which we hope will pass. Once it goes there, then it goes to the House, and it starts working its way through the House. And as you know, it's a short legislative session, so we're kind of moving quickly as we can with this piece of legislation. And I think the questions you have to ask is why should we support this? It's to give us more tools and an opportunity to do more with tourism, both from the Sports Commission's perspective to bring more events into the region that benefit our community, and for Visit Spokane to do their convention and destination marketing, which is critical to our whole region. So we're asking for your support, and I'm open to whatever process you need to go through to hear more in detail about what this bill is going to do for the state.
Okay. What was your timeline for us to take action?
I wish I had a good answer for that. It's moving pretty quickly, so the sooner that we could get the support, the better, frankly. We're confident that it's going to get to the Senate here probably, hopefully by the end of the week, and start working its way to the House. So the sooner the better.
Okay, so, just to make sure I understand this, so this would just raise the cap, would it be up to, I know we have our little
Ceiling hotels and stuff, we get together and we decide where this funds are allocated.
This is a little different. There's a real confusion between lodging tax, which is a sales tax on a room stay. This is a $2 assessment, no matter what the rate is, which is reinvested back into tourism.
Okay, thank you.
So ultimately, because a question that you're probably kind of leaning towards, what happens is, what will happen is, let's assume it passes, myself and Visit Spokane and other interested parties will come back and make a presentation to the local hotel industry and ask for their support that would then come to this legislative body to approve any raise in the assessment or whatever you determine based on the marketing goals that we have for the region.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
How much does the city of Liberty Lake currently get?
I don't know if I can answer that. I'm going to guess it's about 30 or 40,000. Katie here, she can probably answer that better than I can.
Well, actually, what we're receiving is close to 80,000.
Oh, there you go.
In fact, this last time, I think we gave out
No, it's
just over 68,000.
That's the
lodging
lodging tax.
Is that, yeah.
That's different.
Now, sometimes they do
Or
get mixed
lodging
in.
tax, I'm
They
sorry.
do get mixed up together, so
Yeah, so
What he's talking about is about closer to 30, I believe.
that's what I'm guessing.
And this is something that Greater Spokane, the GSI rather, was talking about during their meeting as well, right, and looking for support. Typically, when we have organizations that are asking for support toward a House bill or Senate bill, they'll have kind of a mock-up letter that the city ends up signing. Do you guys have something like that?
We can certainly do that.
And maybe get it to our city attorney to look over.
Okay.
And then that way it gives you guys a second to think about it. And once it gets to him and gets vetted, we can proceed forward if that's what we decide.
That's all I'm asking for, is the process.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other citizen comments? Okay, we will move forward with our special presentation.
3 minutes.
You got 3 minutes.
About 2.5. And roll it.
So before we get started, Ann has a sign-up sheet that she made sure I was supposed to have everyone sign, so we at least have a record of those that were in attendance for record keeping, since there is a requirement for elected officials to have certain training, of which this is one of them. The second thing is I'm throwing you a curveball, and I'll take the blame for that on Public Records Act training as opposed to open public meetings. But that will be forthcoming soon because Ann has informed me that certain deadlines are in place. So you'll get both here relatively quickly. With regard to the good thing though is with regard to the Public Records Act, there's been a couple of decisions in the last 4 or 5 months that have come down from the courts that I think are helpful for everyone to be aware of. And some of them you may have heard about. Which one? This one? This one? Okay. So, in 1972, and some of you may know this information out of background, but for Phil and Annie who have maybe not heard this information, I included some of the background information as we go along. But the Public Records Act was actually part of an initiative back in 1972, and then was subsequently codified in what is now RCW 4256. And the basis for it is, and the premise is that public records of the agencies are presumed open. So you start with that premise that whatever the agency has, it's open and available and transparent to the public, unless there are certain exemptions that are applied. Every situation is different. Every situation has different facts that may arise based upon what the city or the government may have done or the agency may have done and relative to the request that may be made by a particular individual. Exemptions are narrowly construed. What's that mean? Well, it means that they're going to look at it the courts are going to look at it from a narrow focus and say that we're going to go with the premise that everything should be released and we're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the requester, not to the city or the state agency. So what does it apply to? It applies to state government agencies, applies to local government agencies, applies to the legislature now, which is one of the recent decisions. And what is an agency? That's not just elected officials. That's planning commission, that's youth commission, that's arts commission, any other type of commission that is put together by state, local jurisdictions. And with regard to the legislature, this was a decision that just came out in December. You may have seen it. It involved the media companies making a request for certain documentations from the state legislators. And they didn't want to give them up. They said there was an exemption as it related to state legislatures. It went up to the Supreme Court, and in December, the Supreme Court said, no, you have to disclose that information. Cases Associated Press versus Washington legislature there. Now, the question will become, do the legislators try to do something differently, either in this session or in the future, with regard to putting their documents as exceptions to what may happen. But at least at this point, and that's what the court essentially did, and their analysis at the end of the day was, when you read the statute, the legislators are agencies and they're subject to disclosures. And if they want to do something different, the court said, you can do something different. But the way it's written right now, you have to disclose your records. So with regard to what does not apply, court records, those are already public documents that you can obtain, certain volunteers. And so that doesn't necessarily mean volunteers relative if you're on a planning commission or youth commission. That is if you're not serving in any type of agency capacity, you've not been appointed to some type of role, board, or you don't have any kind of supervisory authority. That's what it means with regard to volunteers and producing records for them. And then private organizations or persons. So what is it that people are requesting and what is it that they may want to receive? And one thing I will say, I'm not going to read through all these slides, you can read through them yourself as well, but I'll just point out a few things that you see. So what's a public record? As you read through that is the definition of what a public record is under the Act. So it's very lengthy, but at the end of the day, it's very broad. And courts like tests, and they like definitions. And so I've underlined there any writing, and we'll get to what a writing is. And then I've also underlined prepared, owned, used, or retained. Those are the key elements with regard to what a public record is and what may be disclosed. Something that's in writing, whether it's pen to paper, on a computer, whether it's on your Facebook page, whether it's a text message, all of that is a writing. And then the question is it prepared, owned, used, or retained by the agency? Here's what a writing is. Pretty long, pretty broad. Just about anything in there you can think of is going to fall under that definition for a writing. So you can see from the perspective of the transparency and the openness and the exemptions being narrowly construed, that they want to try to capture everything that's possible for writing. That's just a graphic that I put up there with regard to what it may be: phone, Facebook, your computer, tablet, laptop, what it may be. There's all kinds of different things that are not necessarily related to the city or even owned by the city, but still could be considered a writing and still could be considered something that has to be disclosed under a particular request. So this is kind of a seminal case that happened in 2015, Nissen versus Pierce County, and involved text messages. And it's kind of set the premise with regard to the courts trying to catch up with the statutory language and what should and should not be disclosed. And it's regardless of whether it's public or private, because the distinction was trying to be made, well, this is my private phone and you shouldn't have access to it. Well, if you're conducting city business on your private phone relative to whatever it is you're doing is disclosable. That doesn't mean everything on your phone is disclosable. What's private is private, but if it relates to business and the city's work that you're doing, your private phone is going to be accessible and accessed with regard to records. And then you see with regard to the agency, employee prepares, owns, uses, or retains within the scope of employment. And that's the distinction being made between the private and the public. And like I said at the end, every situation, or I said before, every situation is going to be case specific. Anne will get a request and something will come in and she will call me and say, okay, here's the request, here's the factual scenario, and we go through what it is that we need to request, who we need to contact, whether it's staff, whether it's elected officials, whether it's volunteers, and the circumstances, everyone is different. But the important part to remember with this is just being aware of it, because Anne is taking the brunt of most of the requests and Saki over at the police department. But I get calls from both of them all the time with regard to getting information and how do we obtain it and what the particular request may be. This is just, is it used? And with regard to third parties and what's a public record. Just more information, whether something in call and text logs were used or not, because sometimes they'll ask for phone records. And they'll want the phone records as it applies to council members and the communications that they have. If there's business being conducted, then yes, that's disclosable. If it isn't, it's not and can be redacted relative to what it is that has transpired between council members. Okay, since the Pierce County case, there's been several other cases, and they're identified there related to Facebook. The most recent ones here in October and December were related to birth dates and exemptions, as well as the state legislature issue. The West versus Vermillion Puyallup dealt with the state saying that the constitutions, rather both the state Constitution and the federal Constitution, did not provide an individual privacy interest in those records, so they're disclosable. The other West Puyallup case in 18 addressed the Facebook posts. And then the two at the bottom, the Washington Public Employees case, has to do with birth date information. Now, if someone makes a request for birthday information, it's disclosable. There's a two-part test that we'll see here in a little bit that we'll go through, but the language there is not highly offensive to a reasonable person. That's one prong of the test. And the premise from the court was a lot of the birthday information now is easily obtainable by other sources. You can find it online or at other vehicles. The information is not offensive to give somebody's birth date out, as it may be if there was some type of other personnel issue that arose, a harassment or something like that that is more of a private nature. And it serves legitimate public interest of furthering the openness and of the PRA and transparency. So that doesn't mean that other birthday information for, say, family members in a personnel file are disclosable. They said, no, that isn't, but with regard to the employee, that information is. And then this is an important one, and I just say this from perspective because it's important for Ann and myself with regard to the exemptions, because there are a lot of times when requests will come in and it's not something that we can fulfill immediately. There might be a volume of documents that we need to provide in installments. And with this decision that came out, the exemptions are determined at the time of the request. So if you get a request on January 1st and an exemption applies, you can apply that exemption if you're still giving an installment in August. So it's important that you don't have to go back through every single installment and say, does this exemption apply? Does that exemption apply? So it's an important decision for cities and agencies to be able to know that circumstance. These are just some general procedures and requirements under the Public Records Act. I'm not going to run through all those. You can see what they are, but a lot of this stuff is something that Ann is knowledgeable about and is aware of. But the things that she has to be cognizant of when a request is made. And these are a few more things that are required or a part of requests that are made. Again, these are all things that Ann and or myself discuss or work through when a particular request is made. So this is a public record request. Comes in, and the key word up there is identifiable. There's a number of times where I have discussions about what's identifiable. The city doesn't have to assume or try to create a document relative to what has been requested. You have to be able to say, we're going to go to this record, we're going to go to this department, we're going to go to this agency to understand what it is from the request. So you can ask for clarification. You can't ask why they want it, but you can ask for clarification as to the request. Or sometimes what happens is someone will make a request and we will respond with, we've done a search X, Y, and Z. And if that suffices under your request, then let us know. If not, we'll assume that it is and consider your request closed. But it's not a requirement or necessary for an agency to guess or try to assume what someone is requesting if we can't identify that public record. And this is just a little bit more information as it pertains to identifiable records. And then here's with what requesters do not. Generally need to identify purpose, as I mentioned. They do not have to limit the number of requests that they make. And they don't need to exhaust any kind of internal appeal process or procedures when they disagree with a jurisdiction that might deny a request.
This is one thing you can deny, is if you get computer-generated bot requests where they just get one right after another, and trying to automatically generate a request so you would be flooding the system, so to speak. That, under the Public Records Act, is something that you can deny a request. And here's just more information that I talked about as far as clarifying requests and being able to promptly communicate. One of the big things that happens when cities run afoul of the Public Records Act is they're not communicating, or they're not fulfilling their obligations in responding. You have certain timeframes, and we'll see that here in a minute, when you need to respond to a public records request within a certain number of days, as well as updating as if you're going to provide for installments. So communicating with the requester is important as you move along. And here's the response time. You have 5 business days anytime you receive a request in which to respond. And you can respond in those various ways, whether you acknowledge it and provide the time frame for doing it, fulfilling a request. Sometimes there'll be links that will be provided that will take the requester the information that they want, seeking clarification, or denying. And when you deny it, you have to have specific information detailing why you denied it. You can't just say we denied your request. There has to be a basis and an understanding in the statement that you provide as to why it was not provided. Again, more information with regard to clarification, and because somebody, a lot of times, the problems that you see, and Ann can attest to this more than I can, is the request will come in, we want any and all records for X. We might not know exactly what X is. And so trying to search records that may apply to the police department, or that may apply to engineering, or may apply to public works, or what the circumstance may be, we don't know. Emails, is that other written records, is that applications? So you have to be able to understand what it is in the request, because that's a lot of times how they come in. They'll come in by email, they'll come in by voicemail, they'll come in person, and fill out a form. I mean, they're all various ways. There is no set way that you can say you need to fill it out this way, and because you didn't do it, we're not going to do the request. That in and of itself also creates issues for jurisdictions. And this is just a slide with regard to response time and what's reasonable. I think probably the biggest request Ann we had was a year and a half. Is that what it was? A year and a half. So it was litigation based, unrelated to the Public Records Act, but they made a Public Records Act. It's the one thing from a personal standpoint as an attorney that I don't care for, although there are others, but in this particular instance, is that if you're involved in litigation, you can use against a jurisdiction or an agency the Public Records Act to obtain documents outside of what you would normally in any other litigation if it was 2 private citizens or 2 private entities. And you come back with a public records request and ask for all these other documents that under regular discovery and litigation you may not supply in the same manner that you would in a public records request. So in this particular case, it was very large and very extensive, and we provided installments, but it was 18 months, maybe more, that we worked on it is trying to fulfill the request. So it can be very lengthy and time consuming and expensive. Here's just with regard to the installments and what we do, and we just would provide the installments at a particular point in time. We would have a letter that identifies what we provided, what was still outstanding, and when we estimated the remaining records to be provided. This is just information on the type of searches that are conducted, and what will happen, and I bolded there. Judicial inquiry in the agency's search process, not the outcome of the search. And at the bottom, the agency bears the burden of proof to show the adequacy of the search. That's huge. So you want to deny something, you want to not provide it, you got to have a basis for doing it, and we have to demonstrate as a jurisdiction that we in fact did those things. Because the court's going to look at the city and say, did you do this, did you do that? And if you didn't, then you're going to get taxed with not only penalties, but attorney fees and other, depending upon when you get the information. And so when a requester comes in and makes a request, they don't have to say why they're doing it or what they're asking for. They can just say, we don't think you're giving us everything that we believe under the request. City, it's your burden to say that that's not correct. So this is just with regard to segregating public records and devices, as we talked about before, because it's important to keep that. And I think, sometimes it's easy when you have your phone, you have a lot of messages and emails and things of that to want to create space and deleting those. But to the extent that they are related to city business, don't do it. And that's why it's important as much as possible to run everything through the city servers, the city's phones, so that when Ann is trying to search the records, she has access to them and doesn't feel like there's anything that's missed. There is a process now where, to the extent that there is something on a request that's made for, let's say, an elected official on a private phone, there'll be an affidavit submitted to you that says, I did this to search my phone, this is what I found, this is what I didn't find, there isn't anything else relative to the request, and you sign that affidavit for record keeping and a potential denial of a request.
Can I interrupt with a question? Mike, I think you may have been at the meeting with me. It may have been another one of the newly elected officials trainings that we went to. One of the attorneys from AWC who was giving the talk was talking about how long we actually have to keep certain emails. Right. And I think at that time it was 2 or 3 years. Did we ever confirm that? And, because I think the point was to reduce the burden on Public Records Act. If you wipe out your emails, that are over 3 years, that you don't have those records set to search.
And generally, I think it unfolds with whatever the retention requirements are for documents, and they vary. So there's I want to say statute, I think, that addresses it. It may be another administrative code or provision that I'm thinking of, but it sets forth how long, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the circumstance may be, to whatever topic is that you may be having to keep it. And you want to make sure that you follow the retention policy, because if you don't, then that creates problems as well. But I agree with you in relation to Ann, just don't want to do it after, say, 6 months. If the retention policy is 2 years, after 2 years and a day, then you can get rid of it pursuant to that. But there are certain retention policies or procedures that you can follow, and it's voluminous trying to do it, so it just kind of depends. But if you have something from 4 years ago, the likelihood is it's probably not something to keep, but there are some that are longer than others.
And if there would be any way for us to get whatever that longest number is, so we would know that everything falls within that, we can find out what that number is. I mean, for some of us who've been around 10 years, 8 years, 11, I've got emails going back to day one, and we know that everything would, within 5 years, needs to be, it will fall in that window. That's great. We can wipe out everything else. But if there's any way we can get that.
Sure. This is just more with regard to the exemptions and how they are narrowly construed, and they need to be authorized either under the Public Records Act, or you can have other statutes that may apply. The city of Liberty Lake mostly, and probably deals with it some, but mostly we see it with the police department. There'll be other statutes that apply. You might have children that are involved in something. There are other statutes that apply that are different than 4256 that may preclude the release, juvenile information, sexual harassment, what's the word I'm looking for? Assault, yes, thank you. Those types of things are not disclosable. Victims that are a party to that. And so those things have other statutes that are not under 4256, but have statutes that preclude disclosure of that. So either under the Public Records Act or under another statute to deny the request. And that's just kind of information that needs to be provided when you are denying the request. Almost finished, I promise. This one is just I talked about the test. This is the privacy test, because there is no privacy exemption. So the question becomes, is it highly offensive to the reasonable person and not a legitimate concern to the public? So with regard to sexual assaults or children victims of abuse, those types of things, that is offensive to a reasonable person, and it's not has anything to do with the public. But it's more and more, the decisions that are coming out from the courts are finding that things are to be disclosed, and this particular test is very hard to satisfy, in my opinion. So keep that in mind with regard to things that you may think are private. So what happens if there is a situation where you deny a request? What happens? Court can impose civil penalties. The requester doesn't have to demonstrate that they had damages. And there's factors that come into play as to what the penalties may be. And then the big one, which always is the case, is attorney fees and costs that come into play. I read where the state, in the recent one for the legislators, had paid an outside firm $350,000 to defend the request alone. So just imagine what the attorney fees and costs would have been on the other side for pursuing it from the media side. I haven't seen what that is, but I suspect it was a large number. Here's some mitigating factors that can come into play, and it revolves around process and what did you do in getting the records to the requester, and did you follow a process that was reasonable and prompt, and did you communicate correctly? Those are things that the court will take into consideration as to the penalties that they would impose. Because in some cases, they can impose $100 a day for every day that you didn't provide it. So if you end up litigating it, $100 a day, and it ends up a year, just in penalties, let alone anything else. These are things, though, that can increase the penalty. There are a number of things there, but it boils down to that the city or the jurisdiction just had done nothing to prepare itself for a process for wanting to provide the records, and that they were either intentional or negligent in being able to provide the information. Here's one that you'll enjoy to see. There can be criminal liability for willful destruction or alteration of a public record. So it's obviously goes back to the part of making sure that you keep the documents you have within an appropriate time frame, and don't do something intentional that would keep the records from being disclosed. And then the last couple slides here, this is just more information that if you want to obtain and refresher courses, the requirements of getting training every 4 years and or going to the Attorney General website or MRSC. They have various webinars and training that you can apply to, and Anne has a lot of that information too that I'm sure she can supply as well. and it's a sunshiny day. Any questions?
We'll start out on this side.
I just have one question. How does one deal with spam email or junk email?
This one, sir.
Spam email or junk email, can you delete that?
I guess it depends on what, is someone asking you for something, or what is it?
No, if I'm checking my email
Right.
and there's a spam file over there and you look at it and it's obviously nothing related to
City business.
city business.
Are you talking about the city email account or your personal account?
Well,
Well, from the standpoint of the city email account, if you delete it, we'll still have access to be able to track it down. We've done that before, so that won't be an issue. But with regard to a private email, if it's not something that you are engaging in or communicating or have to take some type of action, and it's just a spam, if you will, in a general sense, I don't think that's an issue. Again, it's tough because everything is a case-by-case basis as to what the factual request may be. So if there's something that you have, or I would say, as an example, forward it to me, and I can give you a better, definitive. But just in the general context of what a spam would be, or a request that would be made, or an email that be sent rather than a request, I would say that wouldn't be an issue.
thank you.
So they're getting a spam email from a bank saying we have the lowest interest rates ever.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant. to
Yeah, that's
city
different.
business. Right.
After a while, you'll get on so many lists, just like you do in your personal business.
Yeah,
That,
just gets more.
the parking magazine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get that all the time. Sean, I've got a question. Let's say, for example, on my personal phone or even city phone, if I send an email or something to Chris and say, hey, Chris, are you going to be at the meeting, GSI meeting next Thursday? You want to share a ride? Is that considered public? Because what we're talking about?
Yeah, there's.
Do I need to keep that?
It's not,
Well, is that a gray area?
I would say it is just, there was a recent case, and excuse me at the moment, that actually was the Facebook case that came out in 2018. And one of the issues is on Facebook or text, if you're just disseminating information, that you're not necessarily doing anything with it. So in this particular case would someone have a text message or a Facebook post that was just saying, go to this site or meet me here or disclose this information or passing on a city agenda, those types of things. Those were not something that were subject to the Public Records Act. So I think in your example, it's kind of a similar nature, that it would not necessarily be a part of that. But if you took it a step further and said, we're going to do this at the meeting, then yes, I would say the answer to that would be true.
But something, if I another council member to say, Chris, you want to have lunch, let's get together, want to talk about a few things, that could be construed as it might be city business.
Potentially. I mean, if you get into detail of talking about things and saying yes, I would say that that's potentially something that could be disclosable.
Yours?
Good.
All right.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay. City Board and Commission reports. Library Board.
Good evening to the mayor, the city council, and to the citizens of Liberty Lake. I'm Sandy Bishop, and I'm on the Liberty Lake Library Board of Trustees. And the most recent meeting, the trustees put together a quick article describing what the trustees do, and that will be printed in the March splash. Is that correct, Wendy? Yeah. So be checking that out. Jocelyn presented to us a draft of the work plan to review, and it is coupled with our strategic plan. We started that, and in the March meeting, we'll be spending more time prioritizing some of those things, but there are just a few items I want to give you an example of. One is the programming for all ages, and tracking of programming outcomes is part of that work plan. developing partnerships with community groups, the configuration of the library to meet current and short-term needs, and develop library services plan that addresses short and long-term library service and facility needs. Those are just 4 of like about, what, 20 of them, would you say? Yeah. So are there any questions about that? So stay tuned in March, you'll get a much more detailed report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, sewer and water?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? I do for you. When I get to my report.
Unless you have some questions.
Yeah. Fire? No, good. Youth commission? No? Okay. Parks and Rec? Yeah. Simple one. Planning commission? Yeah, sorry. One more. I knew I was gonna miss one of them. Thank you.
Just real quick, Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you. I just wanted to go over some things. Thanks for your work on our 2 new commissioners. I think we had 3, but one of them resigned before they started. So we have 2 new commissioners, Kate Lavin and Shelley Dickinson. And then we've also selected new design review subcommittee members so that we have different people on that. Joe Mann, Jesse Fox, and Paul Brown will be on that subcommittee. We continue to work on the city landscape code. We did kind of go through the code itself and give some guidance. Barbara, mainly get her to be able to start putting pencil and paper to write the code and follow what we kind of put together. Last thing is, I'm going to be out of town till late April, so Charlie Matthews he's my commission chair, assistant chair, so he'll be here during my absence. Any questions?
Thank you. Okay. Mayor and City Council reports. Anything from the council?
I got one, week ago Friday, Mayor Brickner was unavailable, so I was involved with a conference with Jennifer Labias and Mike Patton, talking about Impact 976. It was a very good discussion. I really appreciate Mike being so supportive of what we're trying to get accomplished here. And Jeff was very positive in regards to dealing with everything that's going on over there. So we're moving ahead. I think they're doing a good job for us.
Okay. Okay. So I got quite a few things I'll touch on. The very first thing that I want to bring up, I asked Ann to print this off and put before you. It's regarding freight mobility coming from Spokane Valley. And when we were looking at this, you can see kind of what the request is. It's a freight mobility and safety project, and they're looking at reconfiguring the freight line out to Sullivan, that whole kind of corridor of that train system. And while it doesn't necessarily come into the city of Liberty Lake, it does potentially impact the safety of our community. So the INFRA applications are due next Tuesday, the 25th. And rather than include hard copies in the application, the city intends to post, the city being Spokane Valley, intends to post letters to the project webpage and reference them in the application. At this point, it'll allow opportunities for surrounding agencies to show their support. And so this is more for you to kind of look over, to think about, and to come back to our next council meeting if it is something, in fact, we want to support. And this is something that we have touched on, and I'll touch on quite a bit, in working more collaboratively with our neighboring jurisdictions, whether it's the school district or a city next to us or other entities, to support each other and accomplish some of the goals we're trying to accomplish. And with that, Ben and I, Ben being from Spokane Valley, the deputy mayor for Spokane Valley, have discussed at some point trying to have a joint meeting between their council and ours to discuss projects that we have going on both sides and how we can really work on supporting each other, especially when we're going for state funding and how that can look. So I look forward to further discussions on that. So look that freight mobility information over, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. Let's see, Sewer and Water District. I made a promise that I would try to give you an update on every meeting I attend. So this was the meeting that they had last week. One of the things that was discussed at the Sewer and Water District meeting was in relation to, and we heard a little bit about this, it was in relation to the cross-connectivity control policy. This policy is in relation to the testing of the backflow systems that were brought up at one of our council meetings. And so letters are going to start going out around April 1st, I believe, if that's correct, this year, to show the intent of what they're going to be doing. They're hoping to get everybody to participate this year, and the goal is to have them done by June 30th. There is, I asked about ballpark, what the pricing is to have this done in your resident, to have your water system tested, and they said it really ranges between $35 and $75. So you want to try to get that going, and we had a discussion about, as we put this into place, imagining 4,000 residents calling to have this test done in a couple month span might be tough to accomplish, to get them out to test everybody's water system and backflow. So really, I believe the first year, correct me if I'm wrong, the first year was kind of the educational time, and then the following year would be more of the, we're going to enforce this pretty strictly. Is that accurate?
Kind of a soft launch. It's more education on the front end. It's going to sound like we're being really serious, but we're not. We're just letting people know what it will be like the next year. Because we're really going to be, we're going to enforce this, but we're going to give people plenty of time to catch up.
Yeah, and obviously the goal, especially with the water boil issue that we had recently, it's good timing to show why it's important that we get this testing done on the residential side to minimize those impacts of future issues.
Question?
Yes.
Two questions. One, is there going to be a way for people to know who's good to do these?
Yes.
And then also, is there any documentation that's going to be required for that?
Yeah, so when they send out the letters, they're going to send them out a couple times, and they will notify you if you're impacted by that area, because there's some residents in the river district that won't be impacted by this at all, based on their water system and versus this side of the freeway. So you will be notified if you have to have this done or not through that letter, I believe. And then once you have that test done, it's important as the resident to confirm with the agency that you have that test done, if they will be sending it into the city on your behalf to show that it was done, or if you need to do that. Most of these agencies that do this, they typically communicate those test results, or they know that they should let you know how those results are going to be communicated, whether you have to send it to the city or they do it. Am I correct?
Yes. So what will happen is the certified tester will send documentation to the district, and we will keep track of all that. Now, if you don't have a irrigation system or a pool, you don't have to do it. There's no backflow requirement. But if you have either of those, then you have to be tested.
Yeah. Any other questions on it? Okay. I received a couple emails from GSI to give you guys some updates. So, some of the House bills that are being discussed, House Bill 2494, that's the .09. So February 10th, there was a public hearings for that House bill, followed by a referral to the House Rural Committee. Senate Bill 6209, that is one for joining the nurse compact. That was passed the Senate Health and Long-Term Committee and was referred to Senate Rules. SB 6116 and House Bill 2185, that's reference to higher education access for military spouses. The House bill is in the second read in the Rules Committee. SB 6349 and HB 2614 concerning paid family and medical leave. This is currently resides in the Senate Rural Committee. House Bill 2395, expanding professional licensing for military spouses, remains in the Committee of Origin. House Bill 2303, allowing a service member or spouse to practice a professional regulated under DOL. It's referred to the Rules Committee. SB 6492, adjustments to B&O taxes passed in 2019. It was signed by the governor on February 10th. And SB 6626, create a position of military spouse liaisons, passed into Rules Committee for second read. The session is going to end on March 12th, and there are some requests for support. One of those was from Greater Spokane Incorporated, and I'll get this email for you to all of you. It was reference to SB 6209 to go online and show your support individually for that. So I'll send that out to you and let you guys decide individually if you want to do that. It has the link as well to send letters to the key legislators. That bill is specific to the Nurse Licensing Compact. This compact allows nurse practicing in any of the 34 other participating states to freely practice in other NLS states. So I will get that to you. We have got an email from one of our residents, Tom Salberg, in relation to our pedestrian crossing, and that we're definitely moving in the right direction as far as our protocol on where they should be placed. But as we discussed, there's a lot of value behind continuing that process. And Spokane City had tackled this already, and there were some examples of what they've done for us to take a look at, which will be disseminated to you guys to look at further after this meeting. The thought process is that the more we can tighten that up, the better it's going to help for long-term planning of trying to decide on locations and education. So there's a lot of good information that we'll get out to you guys to discuss. And I think it would be a good topic to include in our retreat for the conversation. If you guys are all good with that.
Sounds great.
Okay. Let's see. Yes, I took care of that. Regarding our retreat, we will be having the opportunity to talk about a lot of different topics. It's important that if there's certain topics you feel we need to discuss that, please get that into Katie. If there's anything in particular we feel we need to be discussing, we're formulating a list now of what those topics are. You guys really have the ability to drive what we discuss, activities we do, things like that. It was slotted for, I believe, about 4 hours. I would like us to think about and be cognizant of we don't want to necessarily minimize ourselves and try to rush things through if we have some great topics of conversation. So I would encourage you guys to think about if we want to extend that to about 5 hours, so we aren't limiting ourselves and having to increase it that day.
Question, I know in some of our retreats in the past, we've gone elsewhere, kind of get us out of the council mindset, and I know we wanted to check with the portal and see if we can use one of their rooms, or if there's somewhere else you have in mind.
Yeah, I think that if you guys have ideas of where a good place would be to have it, to kind of get outside of the norm, we had it down at the, you did it at Trailhead in the basement there.
We had it at the fire department.
We had it at the fire department here, yeah, so, yeah, absolutely, if we can think of some ideas where we want to do that at. We do have, some emails that come in from time to time on recognizing staff and things that they do to go above and beyond. Lisa, if you want to talk a little bit about one of the recent recognitions we got from staff perspective.
So actually, we got two of them in the last several weeks. One was specifically related to our plumbing permit and the fact that we had gotten it in an old form and there was some information missing on it, and Barbara reached out to and sent them the form, and she said, well, we don't really need the new one, but I wanted to make sure that you had this. And the email feedback that they were just so pleased because it was so much simplified and it was great, and we were so happy to see it. So again, tip of the hat to Barbara and Kelsey, who have been working diligently to really streamline and improve our permits. So the other one came from Snow Eater Brewery, where not to go into the details in any great length, but we were able to allow them to occupy for purposes of getting the equipment set up and start brewing, as long as they didn't have any members of the public or anyone other than the owners in there. And that was something that they were thrilled about because it really it meant a lot to them to get their operation underway.
Yeah, the emails that came in to compliment our staff were exciting to see that we're already making big impacts on reconfiguring some of our things that we've done in the past and trying to minimize the impact while being cognizant of our policies. So thank you to your staff on that. That is all I have.
I have something if I may.
Yes.
No one else does. I know on our agenda we always have mayor and city reports, but using my own side as examples, some of that I'll get confused on when can we bring something up. So once the council consider this, is that we add another thing and possibly after mayor and city reports. So we encourage us to give city reports, but we may have questions such as myself. I had questions in regards to retreat, and I also had a question in regards to winter golf. So at what point do we bring that up in the agenda? So my thought is we can either add along with council reports. My thought is to add it after council reports to where once we give our reports, then we can have, let's say, council questions. Because using myself, for example, like Winter Glow, I've got a question about Winter Glow, is that at some point we were told, I can remember saying, we're gonna have a report on how successful it was, things of the sort, and so we can look at if we're going to do this in the future, for this council to be able to make those decisions. And something like that I think is important. And I can imagine other council members will have questions also that they will ask.
Well, I think that was kind of the goal and the intent of the staff in relation to our offset meetings, where once a month the directors all bring their information. The following meeting, it's really the council's time from that 6 to 7 to bring questions about things like Winter Glow and retreat topics, things like that. Hugh had his hand up for now.
I hear you there, Mr. Mayor. That's a great idea to try to push things so that they're all in one spot. But on the flip side, it seems like it'd be pretty simple, just put mayor and city council reports and inquiries or something. Reports and inquiries, just to say, each one of us has an opportunity, that's a good open floor to say, just report on something cool, and ask a question about what you're unsure on. Maybe the council to push it to, sound good?
Chris?
Actually, two things. I had a question about your House bills waiting for.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I think the place that Hugh's talking about, works well, but I think we still need to be cognizant of the fact that there are other places. For instance, Councilmember Kennedy's asking about Winter Glow. Well, part of the city administrator's report that's coming up is Parks and Arts project. So something like that to me would be better fitted to ask during the city administrator report. So I think we just need to keep in mind what things are also coming up on the agenda. It may be more appropriate time later on. instead of jumping back and forth between topics all the time.
Yeah, I think if you're referencing the agenda and it's on topic of conversation that night, then you probably wait for that. But if it's something to Phil's example earlier, which he'll reiterate later, you know, it might be something he just wants to get a refresher on where we're at with that topic. And then your question on the House bill.
Yeah, so, one that I didn't hear you mention, I think there's three of them. I think there's one House bill, two Senate bills, or vice versa, with regards to, no single-family housing zoning allowed in Washington. And another part of that is about, allowing ADUs, this, additional dwelling unit, that's what the ADUs usually stands for. Basically, it's, you know, they're trying to get the state to drive what zoning requirements are in cities like, I think Oregon and even Minnesota or Wisconsin has it, so the municipalities are now not allowed to have single-family zoning anymore. And that's making its way through, but I don't know if it had died or not.
My understanding is that it's still, under discussion. I don't know if the hearing's been scheduled for it yet. What I will say is that, it's not really a huge impact at the city of Liberty Lake, because even in your you have to excuse me, even in your single family zone, you are allowed to do some of the middle housing types. We allow in all residential zones, we do allow accessory dwelling units. We do have standards that they have to meet, but they are allowed in all zones. And we do allow for duplexes, and we do allow for zero lot line development, even in the single family zone. So it's more limited in the single family zone than it is in like R2 or in like some of the SAPs, but it is allowed. So I think that from what I've seen, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on us. I think it may have a significant impact on some other communities, but
I think it's just scary that the state is trying to dictate what's going on at the local levels. Is really what my concern is on that. Thanks.
Yeah, let me go back to the question that I had asked, and I like Hugh's recommendation that we look at, have an opportunity to ask some questions, because let's say like Winterville, is that if we have the time to be able to ask those questions, then we can maybe Jen can say, oh, we're going to have a report coming up next month on it. What I don't want to do is get into a position where we want to have something brought up, but we have to wait another month or another 2 meetings to say, oh, I would like to ask this question. I think as a council, because this is council meeting. This is not staff meeting, this is council meeting. So I think we should be able to have the opportunity. I think we can include along with reports, questions, whatever it is. If you have some questions to be able to ask those questions, so Jen or staff can respond to it and say, oh, what you're talking about is going to come up with such and such a meeting. Because if not, it's sort of like, in the past, it's sort of like, I've seen council members, including myself, when do you suddenly interrupt to go, where can I throw this in? So I'm looking for direction from it.
Well, I wonder if this is an appropriate time just to make a motion to alter number 9 on our standard council agenda. I move to alter standard council agenda number, or item number 9 from mayor and city council reports to mayor and city council reports and inquiries. Second.
Question, Sean? Does that, do we need to go back and read
I don't think it's a problem, so that's fine. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Can I ask one follow-up since we're on this?
Yes.
One of the things we were asked to give our input on was whether the city was going to participate in the Liberty Lake yearbook. I think we did that by email, but I don't know what the result was.
The outcome of that was that we are not going to this year, but to maybe look at it in future years and to look at content. Okay.
If I might bring up, I think that's an excellent question, because I think that's a good example. That was a question that was given to the council individually in emails for us to cast comments in the vote. It really was, because it was just stated that it was voted upon and we're not going to participate. If that's the case, I think it needs to come up to a council meeting brought up, motion, second, discussion. If we're not gonna participate, then we vote on that.
I think that we had decided based on the timing of that, if I individually respond to their thoughts on it, Katie could let Josh know because of the timing of the situation. Chris, you have something?
I was gonna point out that because that expenditure was under $5,000, really didn't need our approval one or the other.
Yeah.
And we're just waiting on
Yeah,
our thoughts.
that was more for your input than actual.
No, I totally appreciate the transparency.
Yeah,
on that.
it was trying.
But, and I don't know if it technically needed, we didn't need to go to vote either way, whether it's getting our input by email or not. So I appreciate the chance to.
I think if my recollection was that this is something that's been proposed, is there any interest in doing it? And if there is interest, then we would move it back to the council for an appropriate action. If there wasn't, then there was no need to bring it back.
Right. Okay, city administrator reports.
Thank you, Mayor. Filling Katie's shoes this evening on the city administrator report. First topic, couple of brief updates on projects that the Parks and Arts Commission is working on for our last meeting. Trevor mentioned the Story-Walk project, tentatively slated for Orchard this year. And about half of that project is being donated through Kiwanis. They're offering to sponsor that. Which would be great. We haven't moved forward yet. We're still waiting on SET and Ray and her group to provide us with the invoice we have costs and all that. But we'll keep you updated. The next thing is the Pavilion Mural Project. Pretty interesting. I have a couple of pictures to show you. As I was doing a little bit of research on the actual carousel that was here in Liberty Lake, that's now in Michigan at the Henry Ford Museum, they actually have a goat. That's actually from the original carousel. And so Laura Frank caught onto that at the very beginning when she was working with this artist, and she specified that that goat is actually in the mural. So we will see that goat in the mural. It's a little bit of irony there.
Cool.
And then with that pavilion project, the artist, Rolf Getzinger, has suggested augmented reality. I don't know if you all are familiar with augmented reality. This is a really brief clip of what it is, and it'll speak for itself. So we're moving forward on trying to figure out how we can actually implement this at the pavilion project. Pretty impressive. I'll show you. But for a carousel, this would be spectacular. So it actually filming your phone. Cool.
That's cool.
So you can see the carousel of the pavilion. You can stand on that wall and go down and see it moving or turning. Something new and different, and we don't believe anybody here in this piece of land has anything like it. Fun stuff to share. So a quick update on Public Works Yard. The fencing obviously has been put up. The mobile office is now in place, and crews have been working hard to start clearing out the back lot of everything and anything that they can take over there. We're locked up. We do have 2 lights on site for security, working on a security system of some sort. But it's been running, and we are fully operational, right? Yep. So we'll get ready to move some crews out there, a few of our staff to kind of home base out of the mobile office. And then a really nice picture that Stephen and his crew caught the other morning on their early morning travels, and sadly the screens don't do it justice. This was the most purple I've ever seen. It was really cool. Pretty impressive. Just benefits to working early in the morning.
Jen, I have a question before Sharon. What's the time frame of starting landscaping?
It's, do you want to address that?
So, you just, last council meeting, you awarded the contract for the design for the frontage improvements, which will include the landscaping. And so that is intended to happen this year, but we gotta get the design done first.
Okay. One of the questions at the time we were talking about landscaping came up with, there was a discussion, I don't know what was decided, of having a berm there in the landscaping, be on top of that so it gives more privacy from coming off the hill and visually as time goes on.
So that is my recollection also, and again, it's a matter of the design. I believe that is the intent. We certainly do have robust landscaping that's going to go in front of the fence also, but the berm, I think, is still on the docket.
Very good, thank you.
Question on that, if I can. Of the overall parcel, how much is not being utilized by your yard?
Approximately, I think it's a half an acre. It's not being utilized.
And that's all to the west?
To the east. Where that big rock mole is. We have a small pipe piece up there just to the east of the access road that we cannot utilize.
For equipment?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well solid rock.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I received an email in my inbox from the governor's office. This is new to me. I'd not heard this before, but you will soon be seeing POW MIA flags on our flagpoles at certain times of the year, and they have listed specific dates. It's actually a bill that was passed and became an RCW to do this, of all state, county, city, public facilities. So that's something new and different you'll see around town. First date is March 30th. And they're all dates like Flag Day, Memorial Day, Armed Forces Day, but there are probably about 12 dates on here. So we will be putting those up in our parks and facilities. The Amoresco energy grant, or the energy project proposal that you approved a couple of meetings back, just a brief update there. They're wrapping up their energy audit study this Friday, and next Monday we have a meeting with them, with city staff, to review the findings, and we hope to determine which projects the city can move forward with based on funding, what we budgeted this year, what we didn't, and we will have the capability to have a phased approach where we can, if we can't afford to budget everything this year, we can go year 2, year 3. So those will also tie into the CFP, as they are pretty good sized facility capital projects. So we'll have some more information. It does include the generator in this project as well for the police department. And Lisa would provide us with a Harvard and Henry update.
Yeah, just very quickly, I have some good news to share with you as it relates to Harvard Road, and that is that WashDOT is pushing us after having dragged their feet on the 90% design review. I think we waited 85 days to get the comments, but now they're pushing hard to have the 100% plans and cost estimates given by the first week in March, because they want to be in a position to request the release of funds on March 20th, and so that they're ready to go to bid by April 20th. And they're pushing very hard on this. We've had KPFF is putting the hustle on. We will meet those deadlines, and I think it bodes very well for the fact that they have they seem to promises, but they have some confidence that Harvard Road's going to move forward. And so I'll share that with you. It's no guarantees, but we are working hard to meet their deadlines so that we don't miss the window, miss the opportunity.
So what was that bid date again?
I'm sorry?
What was the bid date you said again?
So they're April 20th.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so the other thing, we did have our kickoff meeting with Henry Road on the 11th of February. And we will have cultural resource review underway by the end of February. We also have, Mike Terrell is on the team, and he's going to be dealing with both the landscaping, which we have $150,000 credit for our landscaping, but the landscaping is our design. It's a good thing. It's a good thing not to have WashDOT touch on their landscaping. But he's also going to work with the Parks and Arts Commission on the opportunities for public art, and he's going to be meeting with them March 3rd to kind of give them the scope and the timeline for this, and to throw out some ideas about we want to come up with a design palette for the whole project that will kind of so that we kind of have some guidelines, and also where there might be opportunities. So very exciting. To get the Parks and Arts Commission on board early on. Just so you know, as I mentioned at our last meeting, Country Vista, the intersection of Country Vista and Henry, that's a very important piece of it. As you know, we need to get them the data on that by the end of March. Really by mid-May, they need to make a decision on what that's going to be so that they can get the right-of-way going. We're going to be at 30% design by the end of June, 60% by October, 90% by December, and we're shooting for 100% design by the end of December or early in January. So we are moving right along. One of the things I do want to point out is that while we have scoped out for an actual open house somewhere 50% design stage, the city's going to take the lead on engaging the community and kind of doing more of a virtual open house throughout the design process. And we're going to make sure that we have materials and that we utilize farmers market as a point for getting that input and pushing the information out this year. So, but it's going to be city staff that's taking the lead on that kind of virtual open house. So that's all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
I do have a question. Actually, on Henry Road, having the Parks and Art involved, was there ever a discussion of a dollar amount or budget that any art would be involved in that?
So again, we actually did have a very conceptual discussion about the fact that we wanted to, you can go all out, or you can focus on things that are within the scope, and it may be whether it's the railings and the design of the railings, or whether it's something that you're doing on the walls of the structure or whatnot. And so we're trying to keep it limited to something that's not going to slow down the design process, slow down WashDOT's approval process, is not going to add significantly to the cost. So, and there's lots of options that fall within that kind of latitude. Now, there may be opportunities at the roundabout on Mission or whatever at the intersection. There may be opportunities for other locations for public art that may happen later in the process that are not part of this project or not part of the budget that we have for this project, but could be planned for at a later date. So there will be potentially opportunities like that as well. What we're looking at are the parts and pieces that need to be incorporated into the actual design.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Lisa had also asked me to share with you that she received an email stating that as of today, the city is now enrolled in the National Flood Insurance Program. All right, dates to remember. So March 3rd, Trailhead Master Plan Special Meeting, 6 p.m. Corridor Study Special Meeting, March 17th at 6 p.m. East Drive, April 11th at 11. We pinned down our bulky waste clean green event at April 18th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Town Square Park. And Council Retreat, April 19th, 2 to 6. And that is the end of my report.
Any questions? Starting on this side?
For the council retreat, I mean, are we going to think about that a little bit longer, or are we going to try to get that into schedules sooner rather than later, for looking at extending it?
Yeah, so, I just want you guys to maybe think about it, and then at the next meeting, we can decide if we're gonna extend it or not. And when you do send topics, to Katie, make sure you're only sending the topics that you want them to her directly. Don't include the entire council in your email. So if there's a topic that you think we should talk about at the retreat, send it to Katie, and she'll notify all of us.
I want to really encourage the council is to send in ideas so we can have discussions at that retreat, but also I feel it was important that in a timely fashion it gets back to the council on what the agenda is going to be, not 2 days beforehand.
No, it'll go out
ample time so we can look at it on it, because I want to reiterate 5 years ago when you guys had it, that what the council came up with like 7 to 9 different things they wanted to accomplish. And then they set priorities of what those were. And the idea was to at least get 3 or 4 of those done. And that became a priority in that time frame. We were able to move through it fairly well versus just randomly hitting things. And what I'm hopeful for the council member, I'm looking forward to be able to cover things that we don't normally able to get into our normal meetings. I hope it's not a matter of having guest speakers and things of this sort here. They can certainly come to our regular meetings to be invited to something like that.
Councilmember Hughes, did you have anything for?
Nothing.
Okay.
Actually, no.
Okay. Good. Okay. Moving on. Get to it. Action items.
Action items, consent agenda. 1, approve February 4, 2020 city council minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Action item, consent agenda 2, approve February 18, 2020 vouchers in the amount of $547,300.05.
Second.
All in favor?
Assuming that was the motion.
Yes.
I don't know that I want to make sure we're not stepping on any breaking any rules. We're not doing the motion. I want to make sure.
Motion.
Nope. Okay, I think we're good on this.
We have a second, sorry.
Yes, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, general business.
General business 1, award bid for the purchase of 2 police interceptors SUVs to Gus Johnson Ford, an amount of $111,985.96. I move.
Or one of us can just, so moved.
Yeah. I think, my memory is that's how it's always been done in the past.
We always move.
I've always did, when I did it, I was read it as I moved general business number 1 to award this contract, and then there was a second.
That's fine.
Okay.
Is there a motion then? Second.
Yes, there was a second. Need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
2, delegate authority to mayor to I was going to say it after I read it.
We'll get there.
I move the delegate authority to the mayor to execute the Transportation Improvement Board consultant agreement to the Ridge Line High School signal design in an amount not to exceed $51,808.24.
Discussion? I think with this, the only topic that I had to it is in relation to the design of this. I hope that we're very cognizant of where the electrical boxes will be going. So we're not competing the view of drivers as they're coming out of the high school, knowing that there 11 will be high school kids. Okay? I want to say that, so we don't have to worry about moving it later on. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Action item B, general business. 3, I move authorize the mayor to execute the community development block grant consortium agreement with Spokane County.
Second.
Comments? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? First reading.
First reading ordinance, oh, I'm sorry. And?
I'm just so anxious about
voting for this.
Ordinance number 78A, City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington. An ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, amending City of Liberty Lake Ordinance 78 regarding the acceptance, streets, and right-of-way improvements from Spokane County and providing for other matters properly relating thereto.
Okay, introduction of upcoming agenda items.
All right, great list. It's a long one. All right, for March 3rd, 6 p.m. workshop, special city council meeting to discuss revenue sources for Trailhead Golf Course master plan options. There will be a presentation from Spokane Transit Authority and Susan Meyer. And there will be a presentation from Avista, from Melanie Rose regarding smart meter deployment. There will be a purchase, or authorized purchase for the club car range picker. The renewal of the Palenque lease will be on the agenda. Tentatively, there will be an approval for task order with parametrics for bid specs for striping at Country Vista Boulevard and on Knox. There will be approval or recommendation for approval of the AV bundle package for the city council chambers. There will be an agenda bill for approval of an extension for the agreement for street sweeping. That'll be a 1-year extension. There is a recommendation and agenda bill for approving the crack ceiling contract as well, a 1-year extension on that. We have an agenda bill for the purchase of a Kubota RTV. We have an agenda bill for the purchase of a zero-turn mower for operations and maintenance. Tentatively, we have a surplus resolution for the disposal of multiple items around City Hall and library and parks and operations and maintenance. We have a second read ordinance 78A, and we have a second read ordinance 241B.
Okay. Citizen comments. Not hearing any. We will move into executive session at 8:30 for roughly 10 minutes.